Hey guys, welcome to Nocturnal Nightmares TV. Have you ever, walked through a cemetery at night? You know that feeling, right? That little shiver down your spine. It's like this weird mix of peace and, oh my God, get me out of here. Cemeteries are these super interesting places, you know? They're full of stories, literally. Some people find them creepy, some people find them beautiful. Me, I think they're like the ultimate setting for a scary story. Okay, so picture this. It's like 2 a.m., right? Stupid o'clock, I know, but I'm wide awake scrolling through these online forums, and I stumble across this thread. The title just jumps out at me. Haunted Cemeteries in America, duh, I'm clicking on that. And as I'm reading, I realize something. Cemeteries aren't just quiet places where, dead people hang out. No, they're like these giant magnets for weird energy, for leftover emotions, for spirits. I mean, think about it. For centuries, people have been saying goodbye to their loved ones in these exact same spots. All that grief, all that love, it's got to go somewhere, right? It's like it seeps into the ground, into the trees, into the very air you breathe. And sometimes, just sometimes, that energy, it manifests. One story I read was about this cemetery in Salem, Massachusetts. You know, witchy vibes and all that. Anyway, people kept hearing whispers coming from the woods at the edge of the cemetery. Like actual voices. The creepiest part? Whenever they tried to record it, their phones would go dead. Dead! Can you imagine? There was this other story about a cemetery in New Orleans, and people kept seeing this figure dressed in all black, just wandering through the tombstones. Some people said it was a grieving widow. Others said it was a restless spirit still searching for something. And then there are the stories about the shadows. People seeing shadows move out of the corner of their eyes. Shadows that seem to have a life of their own. I mean, shadows are creepy enough on their own, right? But in a cemetery at night surrounded by all those graves, it's like they take on a whole new level of creepy. This story, you guys, it still freaks me out. So there's this guy, right? Let's call him Jake. Jake's grandparents, they were like high school sweethearts, total OTP, the whole deal. When his grandpa died, they buried him in this beautiful cemetery, this place called Willow Creek. And Jake's grandma, she visited his grave every single day without fail. She'd sit there, talk to him, tell him about her day, you know, like you do. Anyway, one day, Jake goes to meet his grandma at the cemetery, but she's not there, and he's like, that's weird. So he starts looking around, and that's when he notices it. His grandpa's gravestone, the one his grandma visited every single day, it was gone, vanished, poof. Jake's freaking out, obviously, so he calls the cemetery caretaker, this super old guy who always had dirt under his fingernails, and the caretaker's like, nope, haven't seen it, haven't touched it. But Jake can tell he's lying. There's something off about the way he's acting, you know? So Jake starts doing some digging, literally and figuratively. He finds out that there have been other reports of things disappearing from the cemetery. Flowers, vases even, like a whole statue at one point. But no one knows what happened to them. It's like they just vanished. Jake's convinced that the caretaker knows more than he's letting on, but he can't prove anything. And then, a few days later, Jake's grandma, she disappears too. Just like that, gone. No note, no goodbye, nothing. It's like she just ceased to exist. The police, they investigate, but they can't find any trace of her. It's like she just vanished into thin air. And Jake, he's left with this horrible feeling that whatever happened to his grandparents, it started with that vanishing gravestone. This next story, it comes from a listener, and let me tell you, it's messed up. This girl, Sarah, she emailed me after my last video, the one about the haunted doll. Remember that one? Anyway, Sarah's story, it takes place in this tiny town in the middle of nowhere. There's this old cemetery there, right? But it's not just any cemetery, it's infamous in her town. People say it's haunted by this ghostly mourner, this woman dressed in black who appears out of nowhere and then just disappears. So Sarah and her friends, they're like the skeptical types, right? They don't believe in ghosts or anything like that. So one night they decide to go to the cemetery to prove that it's all just a bunch of BS. They pack their flashlights, their phones, you know, the whole 9 yards. They get to the cemetery and it's way creepier than they expected. The wind is howling, the trees are like swaying even though there's no wind, and it's just like super still and quiet. They start walking around, shining their flashlights on the gravestones, reading the names, being all disrespectful. And that's when they see her, standing in the shadows, this figure dressed in black. At first, they think it's just another teenager, messing with them, right? But then the figure turns and they see her face. It's pale, like super pale. And her eyes, they're completely black, like no whites, just solid black. And she's smiling, but it's not a nice smile. It's like this creepy, knowing smile. Sarah and her friends, they're like, oh, hell no. And they start running. They run and run, but the figure, it's like she's right behind them. They can hear her footsteps, slow and deliberate, like she's savoring the chase. They finally make it to the edge of the cemetery, and they look back, but the figure, she's gone, just vanished. They get in their car and drive away as fast as they can, and they never go back to that cemetery again. This last story, it's like next level creepy. It's about this crypt, right? This big ornate thing, like something out of a horror movie. It's in this old forgotten cemetery, all overgrown and neglected. And legend has it that the crypt is cursed. See, the person buried inside, he was like this evil dude, a real piece of work. He made his fortune by exploiting people, and he was rumored to be involved in all sorts of shady stuff. Anyway, the story goes that when he died, his spirit, it couldn't leave the crypt. It was trapped there, forever bound to the earthly realm by the weight of his sins. And anyone who dared to disturb his crypt would be met with, like, unimaginable misfortune. So, naturally, people stayed away. I mean, who wants to mess with that, right? But then there were these kids, teenagers, full of hormones and bad decisions, and they decided to have a little party in the cemetery because, nothing says fun like hanging out with dead people. They brought their boombox, their beers, the whole bit. They were laughing, shouting, generally being disrespectful. And then one of them, probably the drunkest one, he gets this bright idea. He's like, let's open the crypt. The other kids, they're hesitant at first, but the drunk kid, he's persistent. He stumbles over to the crypt, fumbles with the lock, and somehow he manages to get it open. The other kids, they're freaking out now, telling him to close it, but it's too late. The moment the crypt is open, the air turns ice cold, like way colder than it should be. And then they hear it. This low growl coming from inside the crypt. The kids, they're terrified. They turn to run, but the crypt door, it slams shut. They try to open it, but it's locked. They're trapped. The growling gets louder, angrier, and the temperature drops even further. The kids, they huddle together, terrified, as the sound of their own screams echoes through the cemetery. And that's when they see it. A pair of glowing red eyes peering at them from the darkness inside the crypt. The kids scream again, but their cries are cut short as the eyes begin to glow even brighter until they're the only source of light in the entire cemetery. The next morning, the cemetery caretaker, he finds the kids' boombox abandoned near the crypt. The crypt door is slightly ajar. He never finds the kids. Some say they were taken by the evil spirit that haunted the crypt, dragged down to the underworld to pay for their disrespect. Others say they simply ran off into the night, traumatized by their experience. But whatever happened to them, one thing is for sure. No one ever dared to disturb the cursed crypt again. Cemeteries, man. They're these places where life and death, literally collide. They're full of stories, some sad, some peaceful, and some, like the ones we talked about today, totally terrifying. Those whispers in the shadows, the vanishing gravestones, the ghostly mourners, the cursed crypts. They're reminders that maybe, just maybe, there are things out there that we can't explain, things that go bump in the night, things that make us question what we believe. So, the next time you find yourself walking past a cemetery late at night, remember these stories. Remember the whispers in the darkness, the shadows that seem to move on their own, and the lingering feeling that you're not alone. Because you never know who or what might be watching you from the shadows. Have you guys ever had a creepy cemetery experience? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more spooky stories. Sweet dreams.